Welcome to the Black Gems Dive In podcast, the podcast where we dive deep into conversations about inclusive cultures and everything DEI. Your co-hosts are Kua and Kendra, and we're thrilled to be your hosts as we explore the crucial topics shaping our workplaces and communities today. In each episode, we'll unpack insights, share stories, and engage with experts to foster a deeper understanding of how we can create more inclusive environments where everyone feels valued and empowered.
Hey, Kua.
Hey, Kendra.
We're back.
Y'all, we back for another episode of the Black Gems Dive In podcast.
I feel like the people missed us.
It's been a minute, y'all.
It has.
It's been a minute.
It has. I know a lot of people have been saying that they miss our voices. They want to hear from us, especially because there's a lot of things that's happening in the past couple of months. But candidly, we had to take a moment.
We needed a pause, y'all.
Yeah.
There's a lot that's happening on a regular basis, like Kendra mentioned. In our space specifically, too, it's been under attack. There's been a lot of conversations after some of these executive directives and orders that have come out. And at the same time, people have been saying, like, where's your voice? Like, we miss y'all, come back out. And so we just had to take a pause.
Yeah.
It's been a lot.
Yes.
It's been a lot. How have you been holding up?
I've been holding up pretty well. I had to take a pause mentally. I had to take a pause in terms of reading just the newsreel, what's happening. I mean, we're physically feeling the effects of what's happening in our neighborhoods, what's happening with our communities, what's happening within our nonprofit space as well. And so when you're living in it each day, it's hard to also come and deliver, some of those things as well. So, I've taken a pause on that front, but also, too, been enjoying summer and finding joy in that, too, because, we always talk about joy.
So I think the last time we put out an episode was late May.
Ooh, yes.
Right?
It was the conference with Sarah Taylor.
That's right. So the Women of Color conference that happened, that was an amazing event, too. Lots of folks that went out to that out in Niagara Falls. And then they did a virtual option as well, which was awesome. And so excited to see where they go with it. Yeah. One of the things that was mentioned is just the support around things like this, right? And because these executive directives and orders have been happening, a lot less support is being poured out into the community in that way, especially as it relates to people of color.
But it's needed.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
So how's your summer been?
Summer was great. Summer went by very quickly. We had a lot of engagement activities that happened over the summer. Yeah. Busy. Yes. But it was awesome. We had 3 interns that supported us this summer. Shout out to our interns. That was amazing in itself, right? Having folks that are younger, that are looking for opportunities in their own spaces to get more experience. And so we needed them, badly.
Yes, you guys have been in the community doing some amazing work. I had an opportunity to partner with you guys on a little snippet of the Clean Mobility podcast throughout the week with the kids. Yes. And so I know that'll be released soon as well.
Yeah, so we're going to do a rollout. I think it's going to come out November 1st, actually. Okay. So we had to push that back a little bit. But it was amazing, right? Like seeing how young kids shape the entire process, right? And so they created it from start to finish. Taught them about clean mobility, transportation options, safe and clean transportation options in their communities. It's a part of a larger grant that we're working on with NYSERDA. It's awesome, right? To watch how they went through that process. They then interviewed like elected officials and came up with their own questions. And some of them grilled some of the elected officials a little bit, in terms of the questions. So it was awesome. And shout out to them for all the work that they did.
Absolutely.
But it was cool. It was really cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
What else have you been listening? Because the people have not heard from us. And so we kind of went through a rundown hey, what happened since May? And so I know you have a big accolade that we need to put out there.
Yes, absolutely.
Y'all.
Absolutely. So I can officially say that I am a TEDx speaker.
Hey!
Yes, I feel like we need the... We got Brandy in the back.
Right.
Shout out to Brandy.
Shout out to Brand.
Who has been, our ride or die behind the scenes, but definitely an important piece of the puzzle. So we appreciate you, Brand. I am a TEDx speaker. And, it was an amazing process. At first I was like, I would never do this again because it was a lot. Yeah. But now I can honestly say I'll probably do it again if I had the opportunity. I did it.
You did it.
I did it. Yes.
And so watching Kendra go through this process, y'all. So she had talked about it, and I think we talked a little bit about it on one of our podcasts, just, because Evan was the one like, all right, we're not going across that border to Canada.
I know.
Unless you actually apply. She applied. She found out that she won to be a TEDx speaker. And watching you go through that was pretty dope too, because I think in the beginning, you felt nervous.
I was extremely
nervous. You were very nervous. You didn't know how you were going to do it. And then watching you from then to being on that stage, stoic, you know, confident.
Appreciate that.
Going through that process was really dope.
It was a fun experience. I met, I knew one of the other speakers, but I met 3 other speakers who I probably would have never crossed paths with before.
Okay.
They had amazing stories, very captivating, and I've learned from all of them. And so, you know, even from my speaking coach, Molly, who was amazing, all the way down to everyone who worked with the TEDx organization in Buffalo. So I really appreciate that. And, you know, the link will be shared shortly. They just asked for our final descriptions this week. The deadline was Sunday. So it is finally going to be uploaded to the TEDx
I cannot wait for everybody to see, you know, how amazing of a process that was for you and how dope that is, friend. You did that.
I did it.
You did that.
I know. Everyone's asking what's next. I'm like, rest.
You know.
Rest. But I'm pretty sure I'll have another, you know, something off my checklist that I want to do shortly. So
Absolutely. Yeah. So, you know, all the things, y'all. This summer has been amazing. And I don't know. It's been amazing, and in the same sense, we knew we had to come back, you know, and talk to the people. But at the same time, you needed that pause. You know what I mean?
We needed the pause, and we always talk about honoring that space. We always talk about, like, what is our gem of the day? We always talk about rest, honoring ourselves, and that's exactly what we did.
Right.
But we decided to come back. We knew that, again, our voice was needed. And also, too, we talk about this stuff all the time. So why not share some of the things that are happening as well with the people?
Yes. So,
Speaking of. So we always start off with our diversity dispatch. Again, that's just something that we want to bring to our audience to talk about, you know, what is one of the, I say hot topics, but what is the main thing that people have their eyes on, you know, in this economy and everything that we're looking at from the newsreel. And so one thing that we always talk about recently has been very alarming is talking about the rise of unemployment among Black women in this economy. So there's an article from the Times that says rising unemployment among Black women is a bad sign for this economy. So on Tuesday, the Bureau of Labor Statistics released revised preliminary benchmarking data showing that close to 1 million fewer jobs were added to the U.S. economy in the 12 months ending in March of 2025. Only about half as many jobs were added as previously estimated. To be sure, the American economy is on a shaky ground, which, you know, we feel every day, and worries that the White House may censor or manipulate data if it reflects badly on President Trump's policy adds to the unease. As it stands, recent numbers are not good. Only 22,000 jobs were added in August, much lower than expected, and job growth stalled sharply this summer. In the first decline since 2020, 13,000 jobs were lost in June. On the top of this labor market weaknesses, the reliability of the government's economic data is in jeopardy, claiming that last month unimpressive jobs numbers were rigged. President Trump abruptly fired the Bureau of Labor Statistics Commissioner and nominated E.J. Antoni to the top job. Then it goes on to talk about the economic data and the balance, but then it goes on to talk about Black women are the canary in the economic coal mine. And so it talks about, again, everything that's been happening with COVID-19 and the decline that we saw back in 2020 with the unemployment rate for Black women that surged between February and May, reaching about 16.5, one of the highest among groups, secondly only to Latino women. And then it keeps going that beyond the data. And what we're seeing now is numbers back to COVID. So it keeps going on and talk about how the economy is impacting Black women right now. And so in the spring, unemployment among Black women started rising. So again, going back to what we're seeing, those 2020 numbers, spiking from 5.1% in March to 6.7% in August. And while the unemployment rate of most other demographic groups saw smaller increases or has steadily, but Black women are overrepresented in public sector jobs. The Trump administration's massive cuts to the federal workforce have likely contributed towards over 300,000 Black women leaving the labor force between February and July. Except for the pandemic, Black women have not seen such staggering job loss.
So, y'all, and I know, you know, one of the last episodes we started to talk about this, right? And how this is a sign for the rest of the country. And essentially they're talking about the double tax that Black women have to pay because not only are we Black, we're also women. And so you're dealing with racism and sexism on top of that. Black women in general face lower rates of promotion. You're seeing that Black women are the first that are targeted. And I think the other caveat that we need to talk about and bring into this conversation and discussion is the fact that with the attack on DEI, it felt like it was a direct attack on Black folks, but also Black women. And so the conversations had come up again and again around what does this really mean, right? So not only are Black women losing jobs at a disproportionate rate, we're seeing that, others are starting to lose jobs, not as much as Black women, but white men in the first time, I think they have gained jobs.
Seen an increase almost close to 3%.
So they had an increase of that percentage. And then you're seeing how that plays out in the business sector as well. And so we talk about nonprofits who are also really nervous and scared around these DEI, anti-DEI directives that are coming out. And so a lot of times we're the first line of defense when it comes to some of these things that are happening. And so it's a bad sign. I know there were other stats that talked about Black women are the head of the household, like up to 50 or 60% of Black households are led by Black women. And so when you're attacking a Black woman in terms of her economic stability, you're attacking the Black household and family.
And the biggest thing is, I know I read this earlier in the summer too, you're also was contributing to 300,000 Black women losing their jobs or stepping away from the labor force. You're also contributing to overall economic factors of money that can go back into the economy. And so overall, you're seeing a decrease in GDP, all these different things. And so again, you may think that you're targeting one specific group, but we have a lot of spending power. We have a lot of economic power. And so again, that's a trend that you would like to follow when you're looking at signs of a recession and things like that too.
And so the article then goes on to talk about, this sudden increase in unemployment and financial worry among Black women is not a coincidence. It's a pattern we've seen in recession after recession, and it's one we should not ignore. History shows that Black women's experiences provide a timely and accurate window into the earliest economic cracks that eventually reach the rest of society, to Kendra's point. And so when you think about paying attention to Black women, policymakers can spot downturns faster and respond sooner, limiting the damage. But at the same time, we know that the worry and the concern isn't always there for folks that look like us. I think let's add some personal anecdotes into this, right? We have close friends of ours. We have friends of ours who have degree after degree. They've gone after, specializations and, credentials and all these things. And you have the most credentialed people who are now struggling to find work. And these are folks who have master's degrees. They've done what they were supposed to do in order to get to, where they need to get to in their careers. And yet when these DEI, anti-DEI metrics and measures came into place, poof, their jobs are now gone.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And this isn't just in DEI related roles. These are in a lot of different spaces as well. I've heard about it in healthcare. I've heard about it in other spaces. And so the first folks that are losing their jobs are us.
And statistics show that Black women are the most educated group.
So,
we always joke around and say that when we get bored, we're going to get more degrees or certifications, right? But it's a joke, but that's the reality, because we feel like we have to constantly, quote unquote, level up in order to be on the same playing field as our counterparts, right? And so again, now you're seeing, even I've had conversations with people who are now more in debt because they can't pay their bills because they went to go get other credentialing or degrees, and now they're left without a job, right? And so this is real. I mean, I was one of, back, was it a year ago now, a little over a year ago, when I was working for a tech company who got laid off, right? And then looking at those statistics, you're even seeing, I looked at demographics on that, on their recent report, and you're seeing who's left in the workforce.
Right.
So it's real.
It is real. And I think, at this point in time, it's so frustrating because it's a concerted effort around it. And I think we're in this position in space right now where there's so much that's happening that a lot of folks aren't necessarily paying attention to what that means and what the reality looks like. Like I said, the friend that we know talked about some of her other friends who are now applying for unemployment. And these are folks that have had years of experience, backgrounds in their specific careers, and now they can't find meaningful work. And so what does that mean? What does that mean for us in the long run?
I think, a couple of things, and I wrote about this recently in a linked article that I put out and produced, is that we have to continue to support each other in these circles. We have to continue to elevate folks where we see that there's a gap. So in the spaces that we do occupy, if there's someone that can, occupy those positions in the gaps that we see, continue to elevate them. Yeah. But I think right now we really have to continue to support Black women and, just people who, again, have responsibility when it comes to hiring, when it has responsibility to who gets these type of seats. We talk about sponsorship opportunities, and I'm not talking from a monetary perspective, but, are you speaking about people when you're not in a room? Like, these things matter. Yeah. Right? So we know that those type of currencies matter, and especially in this space.
So more to come on that. It's one that really stings in a lot of different ways because I feel like the goalpost is often moved, right? And I think we're seeing that happen in front of our faces. Even you're applying for roles like in the FBI, and they're talking about removing the education component so folks can enter the FBI or, be serving in a capacity under ICE. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But it's very directed, and it's not on accident that this is happening. And so I think we just have to continue to watch this and look at this over time. Yeah. And so we're going to switch and go into our hot topic, y'all. And so, when we talk about our hot topic, these are things that we're really taking a closer look at. Right now, it feels like every day there's a hot topic and multiple hot topics, and it's hard to keep up with things. And I also want to talk about that. Like, where do you find your sources of news? How do you find your sources of truth even? Yeah. Because that's becoming even more difficult to manage in this day-to-day as well. So the hot topic is coming from BBC News, and it says that the Supreme Court lifts limits on LA immigration raids. And so the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled sweeping immigration raids in Los Angeles can continue for now, lifting a federal judge's order that had barred agents from making stops without, quote-unquote, reasonable suspicion. The Monday ruling is a win for President Donald Trump, who has vowed to conduct record-level deportations of migrants in the country illegally. The 6-3 decision of the conservative majority court allows agents to stop suspects based solely on their race, language, or job, while a legal challenge to the recent immigration sweeps in LA works its way through the courts. The liberal justices dissented, saying that the decision puts constitutional freedoms at risk. Conservative Justice Brett Kavanaugh wrote in Monday's decision that the lowest court restraining order went too far in restricting how immigration and customs enforcement agents can carry out or stops in terms of questioning suspected unlawful migrants. He said, to be clear, apparent ethnicity alone cannot furnish reasonable suspicion, he wrote. However, it can be a relevant factor when considered along with other salient factors. The Supreme Court's 3 liberal justices issued a strong dissent penned by Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who wrote that, quote unquote, countless people in the Los Angeles area have been grabbed, thrown to the ground, and handcuffed simply because of their looks, their accents, and the fact that they make a living by doing manual labor. Today, the court needlessly subjects countless more to these same exact indignities, she wrote. The White House welcomed the ruling, vowing in a statement to continue fulfilling its mandate to arrest and deport criminal illegal aliens. And then it goes on, the mayor, Karen Bass of Los Angeles, and Governor Gavin Newsom, also they criticized the decision. And they said that today's ruling is not only dangerous, it's un-American and threatens the fabric of personal freedom in the United States of America. Newsom warned that Trump's private police force now has a green light to come after your family. And so at the end of the day, what we're seeing happen is what we call checks and balances in the United States. And so we know that there's 3 different parts of our government, in terms of how that function, and there's supposed to be checks and balances alongside. Supposed to be. It's going to be happening at the court level. And so that's what's happening. The lower courts are saying, hey, this is not constitutional, this is illegal. And then it goes all the way and makes its way up to the Supreme Court. And then you have a Supreme Court that is, heavy on one side. That is saying, nope, he can do it. Nope, he can have, just carte blanche. He can do, whatever it takes. And so I don't know what this is going to look like. I mean, we do, because if you look at history,
history repeats itself. I mean, this goes back to Jim Crow laws. Right. I mean, where you have police officers. That's the reason why they were established. They existed in the first place. They existed was to round up the Black folks, right, and put them into prison and have these chain gangs. That's why you have, the prison pipeline, you know, all these different things. And so history does repeat itself. Right. You're seeing that now when it comes to the ICE raids, you know, going back to Jim Crow laws, you had people who were quote unquote rounded up for just existing, you know, walking down the street and looking like you had nothing to do.
Black codes.
Yeah. Right. It was the black codes.
Right.
And now this is being instituted through ICE in Trump's government. Right. And so history repeats itself. We're seeing what happens. We're seeing now, you know, this was in California, but now you're seeing in Chicago, Illinois, where similar things look like they're bubbling up as well. And something we talked about on the side is like, it just takes one, right? It just takes one instance to say, okay, well, now this started a whole raid. Now what?
Right. You know? And I mean, I think that's the thing, right? Like the history component. And this is something I want to really stress, because a lot of folks in this day and age and time are like, what do we do? Right? Like, I don't know what to do. They also don't always realize the reference to the past to when this happened before. And so there's been plenty of times that things have happened. And I think black folks have looked like, this don't smell right, y'all. This is a little reminiscent of a time that, you know, our ancestors had to navigate things like this. But oftentimes it's just like, oh, no, you know, these are folks, they need to come here legally and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, we've seen that these specific targeted attacks are also coming after people who are not, you know, quote unquote criminals and, you know, illegals and things like that in terms of how they describe it. So going back to the Emancipation Proclamation, 1865, when you think about, okay, you're free, but you're only free if you have a job.
Exactly.
You know, and that means instead of, you know, working for free, you can then work for the person who enslaved you and get money by working for them, but then they deducted money out, and there's a whole lot of history in that.
Well, we saw a couple months ago that was proposed by the administration as well, where we're going to the loophole, we're going to deport you, but you can go back and work in this farmer's plantation type model where you're getting paid, but it's going back into this whole agricultural farmers pipeline.
And that was, you know, when you look at slavery, right? So in the Constitution, and this is when we talk about like Emancipation Proclamation and what that did, slavery was illegal except for punishment.
Yes.
And so punishment was if you did not have a job, if you were standing idle, the vagrancy laws and things like that, then you can be essentially re-enslaved.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to use this loophole to then talk about, okay, well, the farmers still need you know, labor. And so what do we do in that instance? Maybe we then release these quote unquote prisoners, illegals to the farm. So it's crazy, y'all. It's really crazy.
The
and we
loophole
need
is
to
the
know
fact
it,
that they're not quote unquote citizens.
Right.
And so that is the loophole in the Constitution.
So
this is why we had to take a break.
Yeah, y'all. We had to take a break because it's a lot. It's heavy stuff.
It's very heavy, and this will have consequences for years and years to come. You know, everything that we're seeing. I mean, what we're going to dive into for our deep dive today is talking about those consequences and talking about, you know, gerrymandering and what that looks like, especially now that, you know, it looks like a lot of states are now playing into the gerrymandering. And if people don't know, gerrymandering is basically redistricting, but kind of using a lot of different tactics in order to do so. Race, right? And so we know it still exists. And it's their article for The Hill, and this is our deep dive, talking about gerrymandering madness spreads to Missouri. And so The Hill says it began with President Trump asking Texas to withdraw its congressional map to win 5 additional House seats for Republicans in the 2026 midterm elections. Let me pause here. If you are not registered to vote, midterm elections, I'm not endorsing and saying who to vote for, but if you are not registered to vote, it is time that you get registered and get all of your family and friends to register to vote, because this will have a huge implication as midterm elections come upon us next year. That's my PSA.
Yes, please.
So this led California to respond with its own remapping initiative, which requires voters, as in this fall, to cancel out these seats by taking back 5 seats for Democrats. Now Missouri has entered the fray with its own remapping plans to give Republicans 1 additional House seat in 2026. Given the razor-thin split between Republicans and Democrats in the House, each seat is quite valuable. A House majority, no matter how small, may be the difference between the president's agenda continuing or Democrats providing checks and balances against them, as well as the likelihood of a third impeachment. A deep dive into this proposed new Missouri map reveals that the state might accomplish and what other states can learn in this process. So in the 2024 election, Republicans won 6 seats, while Democrats won 2 seats. And this was achieved by packing Democratic voters around the Kansas City and St. Louis metropolitan areas into 2 districts. So districts 3, 4, 6, 7, and 8 all won comfortably by Republicans, and District 2 was won by Republican as well, though the margin was just 12 percentage points. This district borders on St. Louis County, moving west of the city. So it goes on to talk about how the redistricting affected the election back in the midterm elections and the overall election as well. So then it also goes on to say the 2022 midterm election results were essentially the same in 2024, though the voter turnout in 2022 was lower than 2024 as expected. This means that voters who specifically came out to 2024 to vote for Trump and voted Republican down a ticket may not show up in 2026, giving Republicans pause to take too many risks with their new map. Settling for 1 extra seat is what they have opted for. So basically, we see the gerrymandering that's happening. This talks about Missouri, but it started happening in Texas, which we'll talk about. It started happening in California, where California was like, Newsom was like, all right, y'all doing that down there, we can play these games too, right? But at the end of the day, you're playing with people's lives, right? I was on the way here listening to a Facebook Live from Jasmine Crockett down in Texas, and she was talking about how in her district and surrounding metropolitan areas, are primarily Black voters and Black constituents and Black people, but you're leaving them with 2 seats, Republican seats, right?
And think about the population in Texas, y'all.
Come on.
I think that's the other piece is like you're trying to diminish and limit people's voices and power through monkeying around with, the districts and what that looks like to limit their power, essentially.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that, I kind of talked about and alluded to when we first started was where you get your sources of truth and where you get your sources of information, because right now it seems like the larger publications and the larger media outlets are also being forced to silence themselves in different ways. And that's because of some of the larger lawsuits that have happened. I mean, CBS, there was a big conversation around that, 60 Minutes, in terms of how they're shaping and shifting what they talk about because, President Trump has gone after them directly, right? I think it was a $16 million lawsuit that they had to then pay back. And so one of the things that I've been doing is trying to find like these freelancer reporters who have worked for these larger agencies or institutions in the past, but now are kind of on their own. Maybe they're on Substack, maybe they're on, other mechanisms that we get media. But one that always comes to the top for me, and literally I read her posts every single day, is Heather Cox Richardson. And I tell everybody that listens to go and read her stuff because she's a historian. And so not only is she reporting and recounting what's happening, currently, she's tying it to the past so that we can have a clear concept and understanding of how the past has shaped what we're going through now. And so a lot of the times you hear people saying, oh my gosh, I just can't wait. 3 years can't come soon enough. But the reality is this has been in the making for a very long time. And she specifically is calling out different measures that have happened that have gotten us here in the first place. So even there was some, and I'm trying to remember the case. I'm gonna have to bring it for the next time that we talk, and maybe we talk a little bit more about media and how to, especially in this day of AI and kind of navigating through that, like maybe tools and tricks that might help folks. But there was a time when the media started to slant more conservative, and they talked about how that has been, all these things have been prepping itself for a time like now. And now you have conservatives who have now used storytelling and connecting through media to really slant stories in a way that doesn't always show the full picture, right? And so she posted on Monday, and it said that on Friday, September 5th, Trump lawyer Cleta Mitchell told Southern Baptist pastor and Newsmax host Tony Perkins that Trump may try to declare that there is a threat to the national sovereignty of the United States in order to claim emergency powers to protect the federal elections going forward, overriding the Constitution's clear designation that states alone have control over elections. Mitchell has long called for voting restrictions and was on the infamous January 2021 phone call that Trump made to Georgia Secretary of the State Brad Raffensperger, in which Trump pressed him to find 11,780 votes that would give the state's electoral votes to him rather than the victorious Democratic candidate Joe Biden. Democracy Docket, the media organization founded and run by voting rights and election lawyer Mark Elias, has been tracking the administration's assault on democracy and has repeatedly called out both such language in Trump's attempts to monkey with the machinery of our democracy through gerrymandering, voter suppression, and now the use of military in Democratic-led cities. In August, Jim Saxa of Democracy Docket explained that through intimidation, harassment, and delays, troops could keep large numbers of voters from casting ballots. The administration might even claim fraud to seize voting machines, as Trump contemplated doing in 2020. Today in Mother's Jones, Ari Berman noted that the administration has dismantled efforts to promote election security and is working to stack state elections boards with loyalists. MAGA loyalist Steve Bannon recently said, quote unquote, they're petrified over at MSNBC and CNN that, hey, since we're taking control of the cities, there's going to be ICE officers near polling places. You're damn right. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, speaking of Trump's threatened military incursion into Chicago, observed that this is not about fighting crime. This is about the president and his complicit lackey, Stephen Miller, searching for ways to lay the groundwork to circumvent our democracy, militarize our cities and elections. And so when I read this, you know, obviously there's a lot of different emotions that go, and I honestly wait to the morning to read some of this because doing this before bed is never, you know, the right time. But this is all with purpose. You know what I mean? I think that's the biggest thing is this is not isolated events that are happening. This is all with purpose. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. There's one website that I follow is the Project 2025 tracker. And if you I got to look it up, and I'll look it up in a moment. But there's a Project 2025 tracker that talks about basically like where we're at, how far we're along. Well, we are along, quote unquote. But how far is this administration along with implementing some of the things that were in Project 2025? It talks about the agency that is going after. It talks about its status, whether it's in progress or completed. And so again, we know this has been a concerted effort. Yeah. They said what they were going to do, and now we're living out and we're seeing it live and in color. The sad thing about it is at the end of the day, again, they're playing with people's lives. You know, we're going back to, you know, we were talking about media and who to follow and who to trust. Yeah. It's very hard these days, right? It's extremely hard. I know it's more, you know, on the other side, but I do still follow NPR, you know. I listen to Code Switch. Code Switch is, I love it. It adds humor. It has historical context as well. And it talks about where we are, you know, and what do we do and where do we go from here. Right. So I definitely follow that. One of the things that they were talking about recently on Code Switch was, again, talking about Project 2025 and saying, like, again, the gerrymandering was there. Yeah. It's here. Yeah. You know, something that we typically see on an every 10-year basis, you know, with redistricting. Now we're seeing it mid-decade.
And blatantly saying, go find me 5 seats. Blatantly calling specific governors to say, you know, go do this for me, essentially. And so I think, this has happened in the past, and not to diminish it because, you know, obviously it's alarming in either case, but the reality is it's in front of our faces. And I keep talking about like the tie back to history. I'm just going to read this one connection point that Heather Cox Richardson connected back to the past. And she said, the apparent plan of the Trump administration reflects the strategy of Nazi political theorist Carl Schmitt, whose writings seem lately to have captured or captivated leaders on the American right, including billionaire Peter Thiel and the man who influenced him, Curtis Yarvin. Schmitt opposed liberal democracy in which the state enables individuals to determine their own fate. Instead, he argued that true democracy erases individual self-determination by making the mass of people one with the state and exercising their will through state power. That uniformity requires getting rid of opposition. Schmitt theorized that politics is simply about dividing people into friends and enemies and using the power of the state to crush enemies. As J.D. Vance described Schmitt's ideas in 2024, there's no law, there's just power.
Yes, and we talked about that.
We did.
We talked about that, right? And it's what we're seeing is the interest of parties over the interest of people.
That's it. And so you're my enemy because you don't vote in the same way that I do. And so there's no law, there's just power.
It's just power.
And so...
And who holds the power?
Who holds it?
You know, who holds the power? one thing I always say is that people have more power than what they think, right? Like I know we keep talking about voting, and I know there's a lot of people who are disenfranchised from the voting system. But again, the 2026 midterm election is going to set a precedent once and for all. Again, does it stall out what's happening, or does it push forward? And this is why it's a concerted effort with everything we're seeing right now. We have to continue to educate people. Yeah. We have to continue to sound the alarm. You know, one thing that I think is happening too is that when you have people who are, again, just feel like they're at rock bottom, where they're like, do I eat or do I vote? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, what do I worry about at this moment in time? Because people right now, I say it all the time, you're feeling and seeing the visible cracks in our communities. I was talking to someone today, just to localize it a little bit. I was talking to someone today who is a board member of Friends of the Night People, and they were saying that ironically they don't have some of the same issues as nonprofits, where they're trying to find funding and money. Okay. But what they don't have is the volunteers, because what's happening is, since the beginning of this year, so from January now until September, there's been an increase of 20% of people coming through their doors. So Friends of the Night, they feed families. You know, they give them they give them a hot meal. They also too, which I didn't realize until earlier this year, they are sometimes the main address for people. So if people are looking for work or they're looking for an employment, you have to give an address. They're a place where people go and get addresses. And so they're seeing an increase in some of the mail that's coming through. So they're just seeing an overall increase of approximately 20% just in these 9 months alone. Yeah. Right. And so again, you're seeing the visible cracks. So if people are concentrating or worried about where they're going to get their next hot meal or the clothes on their back, people are now aloof from what's happening, right, at the national level. And so this is what's happening. They're dividing people even more and making them seem like they have no hope or power. But people have more power than what they think. And
I think that's honestly how she ends this, because she talks about the power has always been with the people at the end of the day, right? And so oftentimes, you know, you feel helpless, like all this stuff is happening in front of you and that there's nothing that you can do. But the reality is there's absolutely something that you can do. Right. To your point, it's so interesting because when you think about people being just kind of like on the brink in itself, right? People have been on the brink for a long time, but now you're seeing an increase in folks that are going to pantries to get pantry services and get support and help. Now, you know that with this big, beautiful bill that they're claiming that SNAP benefits are going to be cut and it's going to be more difficult for folks to achieve it. Now they're talking about, you have to be working in order to receive these benefits, when we know that there's a lot of folks who are not able to work because maybe they have different disabilities or different abilities that preclude them from being able to do that. And so I think saying that all to say, we know that the power has been with people, and I think it's going to take a lot more people to wake up and recognize and realize that we are already in a crisis, right? Like, there's no reason why there should be an increase in 20% of folks needing those type of support services.
And that's just one agency.
And that's one agency, you know? And so when you think about even on the foundation side, there's a lot of foundations who have for the longest time supported food and housing and access and things like that. And now a lot of organizations are looking like, you know, how do we compete with that? Because at the end of the day, this is a need right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is a need. And you're seeing the increase, I mean, from healthcare to...
And all these cuts.
I mean, the cuts, healthcare is increasing. You see, again, agencies not having the money they need in order to serve their communities. And so we have to pull together. A couple of things I've been talking to some community members about. The reality of the situation, I hate to say, is that there will be some agencies that will not be here in existence 3 to 4 years from now, maybe even 2 years from now. But how do we pull our resources together? Maybe that is, you know, physical space, whether that is shared personnel, you know, all these different things. And so we have to come together. We have to hold each other accountable too. Like, girl, did you vote today? Right. Did you register? How many people did you get to, you know what I mean? Like,
and that's hitting because when you talk about, like, we have friends in healthcare and we, you know, we both used to work in healthcare, And there's healthcare agencies that are already planning to shut down services in locations because they cannot afford to sustain. You know, we think about some of these rural communities where there's already a limited amount of resources. Hospitals that are shutting down, different departments, different locations, ambulatory services and things like that because they cannot afford to maintain.
Right.
And the reality is with these shifts in terms of how they're even thinking about reimbursements and things like that, that completely looks different. And so unfortunately, a lot of this stuff isn't going to fully hit until after the midterm election. And a lot of folks keep thinking, oh, we just got to make it to the midterms.
Nah, we got to make it now.
We got to make it now. we got to make it now.
Someone said if we stay on this track, literally, I just had this conversation with someone today. If we stay on this track, we're about 18 months away from just the floor falling from underneath us.
Which is wild.
And you know, it's sad because again, we're only as strong as the person next to us in our communities, right? So we could be, you know, whoever it is, be thriving and quote unquote surviving, but if our neighbors aren't making it, if our family members aren't making it, we're not making it. You know what I mean?
That's the issue, is that we've become such an individualized society that if I'm making it, I'm good, and good luck to you. And I think when you think about how our community fabric is put together, I think
the fabric of
our country, you know, is put together. Like we need to be thinking about our neighbors. And I think even more so when you look at, because, you know, we've had conversations where, okay, boots on the ground, right? Like, oh, this ain't my problem. I didn't vote in that way or whatever. And we know that a lot of Black folks felt really all types of ways after that election, after that last election. And there's been a lot of calls saying like, well, Black folks, where are y'all at? Like, you need to be, you know, standing here and, you know, putting yourselves on the line to basically demand our rights and kind of be out there. But when you think about the connection to Black women losing jobs, right? Like there's a crisis that's happening in the household.
Yes.
And these are usually the people who are going out to demand more. And now how do you do that when you are looking for your next meal?
Or you're also too, as we just said, we typically worked in these agencies who were frontline.
Right.
And now we're not in these agencies that are frontline.
Right.
And so we're not out literally boots on the ground in the streets.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to start just taking care of community.
Yeah.
You know, again, it's a neighbor to neighbor type thing. Like
Absolutely.
That's what the bootstrapping is going to look like.
Yeah. So y'all, you see why we had to take a break, y'all. Because I mean, like, this isn't even scratching the surface of all the things that have happened since we last recorded. But we needed a break to take a breather, recalibrate, and not even we're still doing the work. And I think that's the thing. We're still out in our communities doing the work.
Yeah.
But coming out here and having conversations and kind of bringing folks in, we needed a little bit of a pause and recalibration because it's a lot that needs to happen. But we have to come back and raise our voices.
Yes, we absolutely do.
You know?
And so, you know, this month we will be venturing back down to Washington, D.C.
Yes.
For the Congressional Black Caucus, sharing our voices and just fellowshipping with others as well.
Yeah.
You know, understanding each other's plight, but also to how do we continue to uplift ourselves, our communities. So we will be doing some podcasting, which we're excited for down in DC. And I'm excited to see, I don't know if the word is excited, but I'm interested to see what comes out of the Congressional Black Caucus and what is our marching orders as we move forward.
Yeah. And I think to that point, we have some exciting guests that are going to be coming on our show as well.
Yes.
We're partnering with Stephanie Pete and Second Chapter Bookstore to bring in an advocate who has been in the DEI space for a very long time. To talk about what do we do now, right?
Yes.
Because a lot of folks are scared and nervous. I've seen some shifts happen personally, and I think we're going to bring some of that stuff to light to show how people are still continuing to do the work.
Right.
Because the work is still being done.
Still being done.
It's
it didn't
quiet.
Go anywhere.
It's a little bit more quiet because folks are not trying to make themselves a target, but at the same time, the work is still happening. And I think we need to highlight some of the successes that we've seen, some of the shifts that we've seen in this work, and then bring in an expert to talk about what she's seen on a larger level too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep. So more to come on that.
All right. Well, we back, y'all, you know, and I'm just excited for what this season is going to hold. You know, we, again, continue to amplify these stories and these voices. But I'm just excited to be on these green sofas again and just having a little chat and chew.
And don't forget, our last segment is
I didn't forget.
Okay, because
I was trying to deflect
you
away
trying
from
to
me.
deflect and see who. I'll go first on this, but y'all know we got to do our gem of the day. And there's such, you know, I don't know, there's a lot of things that are kind of happening, and it can weigh on yourself in a lot of different ways. But my gem of the day, it comes from Instagram, and this guy, Corey Allen, posted underrated life skill, pausing to decide if it's worth your energy. And there's some things that recently I had to kind of pause to decide if it was worth my energy. And I think that we're going to probably have a podcast around this specific topic, because it was an interesting topic for me, and an interesting kind of dilemma that kind of came up. And I think that I want to start to share more personal stories and how you kind of navigate that, because it ain't always, you know, glamour and glam and things that are happening. And so I'll kind of relate it back to us pausing to decide if it's worth our energy, in the sense of there's so much that's happening on a regular basis, and everything can't demand a response. Right. There's going to be some times where you clock it. What are the, you know, you clock it, you clock something, you recognize kind of what's happening, but you have to pause in that moment to decide, am I going to, you know, return this type of energy, or am I going to hold, you know, my composure? And in many cases I hold my composure, because there's not that much that's going to allow me to act outside of who I am. But I think it always goes to show that when you can pause in moments and kind of think back, I always try to humanize experiences too. Because sometimes folks might be going through something that has nothing to do with you at all. Right. And so you have your situation and your issues, and it's not going to cause me to act outside of myself. Right. And so I would say pause, recognize, is this something that's worth your energy? Maybe that's something that you can go back to and address later. But I'm in a situation now where I'm just, you know, I'm vibing on a higher level. Absolutely. You know, and so I'm not going to choose to address everything, even though sometimes I should. So I'm just gonna leave
That's what your friends are for, in your friend circle. We get the brunt of it. And it's like, okay, well, you know, I know we wasn't talking to me, so it's okay.
I'm crying.
No, I'm joking. You know, high vibrational over here. So my gem of the day, I was recently reading something about, you know, I love history. I love reading autobiographies. But there was one that I was reading from an excerpt of Harriet Tubman. And I forgot how I came across it. Actually, randomly, I went to the library the other day. Oh, cool. So I got a library card again because I lost mine.
I did that earlier this summer too.
Yes. Yeah. So I got a library card, and then when I was there, I was like, oh, let me go see what they have. And so there was like an older book that was in the quote unquote archives, and it was the autobiography of Harriet Tubman, and they had some other smaller excerpts next to it. And one of the things that Harriet Tubman said in her autobiography was, I had to show them the courage. And so when she was being interviewed, someone said, you know, or the person asked, why did you keep going back? Like, why did you keep going back to free people, free the enslaved? And she said, I had to show them the courage. Right. And so she's like, they visibly had to see the courage. And so I take that to say, like, every day is not, to your point, is not going to be glamorous. Every day is not going to be easy. Life is hard, and every day it gets harder, right? And so if there's a little bit of glimpse that I can show and being vulnerable, because there is courage in vulnerability. True. And lately I've been very vulnerable in a lot of the things that I write, a lot of things that I say, the workshops that I do. But if I can show people that life isn't glamorous, right, despite of what you may think and what you may feel, then of course, you know, we can continue to get through the next step together. Absolutely. Right. And so just letting people show your courage or see your courage and see your vulnerability. And, you know, I just found that really interesting. I was like, oh, my little trip to the library was, you know, insightful.
I love that, you know, and shout out to our local libraries and because, you know, I was actually at the library earlier today. Yeah. They have free notary services, y'all, if you ever looking. So, you know, Meriwether Library, shout out to them. But yeah, I think this day and age, there's so much that's happening, right? And we all have to think about the future. And it often makes me think about like this concept of even Sankofa, look into the past in order to know where you're going forward, right? Yeah. And so in this day and age, you have to have some level of imagination in terms of what the future could potentially look like, even when you're going through the midst of a storm that you don't know what's going to happen, right? And so to that point, I love that connection to showing people the courage, because it's going to take some courageous actions. Absolutely. For folks over the next however long. Yes. You know, it's not just the next 3 years. It's literally like the rest of our lives. Yeah. To kind of continue in this manner and move forward. So. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're back.
We are back. We're back, y'all. We're excited. And we're jumping right back, like Kendra said. So check us out. We're back. Let us know what you want us to talk about, because there's so much that's happening. What's important to you? Shout out, to us on the social medias.
Yes.
All the medias.
The medias. We're going to try to be a little bit more social on the social medias.
Yes. Kendra says she's going to be a content creator, y'all. Okay. So,
speaking to existence.
Yes, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. We're LLCing.
Yes, we are LLCing.
We're making this legit.
Yes.
I mean, we've been legit. It's been 5 years.
So we should have started off with that. We didn't even
start with that.
So August of 2020, I think.
Yes,
is when we started. And so it's been 5 years of Black Gems Dive In podcast.
Yeah.
So that's just a pause to celebrate.
Let's pause.
Yes. And it's going to clock it, as they say, clock it. But we're gonna continue to ride this wave, and it's been a fun time.
It has.
It's taken us so many different places and conversations with people.
Dope places and spaces, y'all. Yes. So more to come. Shout out, Brandy, Jamil, all of our folks that hold us down as well. But we're looking forward to coming back and talking to y'all. Yeah. So see you on the next episode. Peace.
Bye.